Denny Marsh had been eating at the Coldwater Grill for 2 years before it occurred to him that he didn't know a single thing about the woman who ran. He knew what she cooked. Eggs over hard, hash browned in cast iron, coffee that arrived before you asked. He knew she opened at 5:15, that she kept the corner booth clear on Friday mornings, because old Sergeant Willets came in with his oxygen tank and needed the extra room, and that she never, in 2 years, let a soldier pay more than he had on him. Denny had watched her slide a plate to a private first class, whose wallet held $4, take the four, and say nothing about the rest. He'd seen her do it a dozen times. Different faces, same quiet move. The check folded under the edge of the plate before the kid even looked up. Her name was Nora Callahan. She was young, early 30s at most, with brown hair pulled back and flour on her forearms by 6 in the morning. And she ran the place alone except for a high school girl on weekends. The Coldwater Grill sat 2 miles from the main gate of Fort Ashton, on the state highway between the base and the town, and, on any given morning, its 10 stools and 4 booths held a cross-section of the post. Morning shift MPs, off-duty mechanics, the occasional staff sergeant who lived in town and drove in early to avoid the mess hall line, knew all of them by order if not by name. She never made a fuss about any of it. Denny was a cook himself, Army, stationed at the Fort Ashton main dining facility, and he recognized craft when he saw it, the speed of her, the economy. Nothing wasted, nothing showy. She moved behind that counter the way a good soldier moves through a room, knowing where everything is before she looks for it, decisions already made. He'd mentioned it to her once, on a slow Tuesday, told her she worked like someone who'd been trained. She smiled and topped off his coffee and said, "Everybody's trained by something, Denny." He had not thought much more about it than that. The morning the staff cars came, Denny was on his second cup. He saw the first one through the window. Black, government plates, moving slowly on the highway. It pulled into the lot without announcement and parked beside the propane tank. A man in a suit got out and came inside and asked for Nora by name. Not the owner, by name. Nora came out from the back, wiping her hands on her apron, and the two of them stood near the register and spoke for less than 2 minutes. The conversation was quiet. Denny couldn't hear it over the griddle. When the man left, Nora came back behind the counter, poured herself a cup, and did not offer an explanation. 3 minutes later, a second car, then a third. Each time Nora went to the door, spoke briefly, nodded, and came back. The last man handed her a folded piece of paper. She read it once, folded it again, and put it in her apron pocket without changing her expression. Denny asked her if everything was all right. "Fine," she said. And then, because it was Denny and he'd been coming here long enough, just some people catching up on something old. He left it there. He paid and drove to post. That night, the base network ran a notice. The language was formal, the kind that gets read and then read again because the facts don't stack the way you expect them to. Denny read it on his phone in the barracks. Then he read it a second time. The summary was declassified and brief. Specialist Nora Callahan, 75th Ranger Regiment, Combat Communications. 3 deployments. A fire base collapse in the Corangle drainage. The kind of situation where everything fails at once, and a 6-man team cut off and burning through their last battery reserve. For 19 hours, 2 position changes, and 1 direct strike on the relay point. Callahan had kept their communications line alive, using nothing but field expedient repair, a backup frequency her team leader didn't know they had, and what the after-action report described as an unbroken command voice that had walked rescue elements to within 40 meters of the team's final position. The team had come home. She had filed her separation papers 4 months after the deployment and left service without ceremony. The call sign on the record was Cold Line. Denny put the phone down and sat for a while in the quiet barracks room, thinking about 2 years of Tuesday mornings, and a woman who moved behind a counter, like someone who had been somewhere, and had never once said so. He did not sleep especially well. He drove to the diner before sunrise. Force of habit, he told himself. He had no better reason. The highway was blocked. Not by traffic, not by an accident. 300 soldiers stood in a double column along the shoulder, running from the edge of town all the way to the Coldwater Grill's gravel lot. Dress uniforms in the rain. The line was motionless and perfectly dressed, as if someone had called them to formation in the dark, and they had simply stayed. Denny pulled off the highway a quarter-mile back and walked the rest of the way in the gray early light. Past faces he recognized and faces he didn't, all of them forward and still. He stood at the back of the lot and waited. The diner's lights came on at 5:13. He could see Nora through the window, moving through her opening routine in the kitchen. The hood fan, the griddle heat, the first pot of coffee. She didn't look out. She hadn't looked out. The lock turned at 5:15. She pushed the door open with her shoulder the way she always did, a rag in one hand and the door propped with her hip, and she stopped. 300 soldiers standing in the rain. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. She didn't step back. She looked out at the column the way Denny imagined she had once looked at a frequency dial in the dark, taking it in, reading it, deciding what it meant. A man walked forward from the front of the column. Brigadier General. By his rank, he stopped 2 steps from the door and removed his cover and held it at his side. He said her name, her full name, and then her call sign, Cold Line. Then he read from a citation that had been sealed for 9 years. He read it in a steady voice in the rain, without hurrying. The firebase, the 19 hours, the 6 men, the unbroken voice on the line that had walked rescue in. The fact that when the after-action was complete and the commendation was being drafted, she had already signed her separation papers and driven off post in a car with 2 duffel bags. The fact that in the years since, personnel records indicated she had fed, without charge or condition, some portion of nearly every unit that had rotated through Fort Ashton, hundreds of soldiers, across years, across deployments, some of whom had passed through the Coldwater Grill, on their way to places she had once been, herself. When he finished reading, the general reached into his breast pocket. He unfolded the Meritorious Service Medal from its case and stepped forward. Nora stood straight in the doorway. He pinned it to her apron, not to a uniform because she wasn't wearing one. To the apron, where her hands had been working since, before any of them arrived. And he stepped back and put on his cover and saluted her. 300 soldiers came to attention in the rain. The movement traveled down the column like a single breath. Looked at the general for a moment. She nodded once. The way she nodded when she accepted $4 for a $10 plate. Like the account was settled. Like it was simply the right thing, and she was glad it was done. Then she looked out at the formation. "Come in out of the rain," she said. "Coffee's on." Denny Marsh was the last one through the door. He stood at the back of the full diner. Every stool taken, every booth packed, the line stretching out to the gravel, and he watched Nora move behind the counter the way she always had. Same hands, same economy. The metal on the apron catching the kitchen light every time she turned. He thought about 2 years of Tuesday mornings. He thought about the privates with $4 wallets and the plates that came without comment. He thought about 19 hours in a fire base he would never see, and a voice on a line that had not broken, and a woman who had walked away from all of it and opened a diner and kept going. He took his usual stool at the end of the counter. She set the coffee in front of him without being asked. He looked at the metal. He looked at her. He didn't say anything, because there wasn't a thing he could say that would reach the distance between what he had known about her and what she was. He took off his cover and set it on the counter, and he kept it off for the rest of the morning.